of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The roll show all is present except Terry Engel is gone and Rick Schultz will be here shortly. We've got an agenda in front of us. Any amendments, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, we do. We will add under finance the para contract, approving the agreement with the para union. And that will be number 1 under finance.
Okay. I'll take a motion to.
I'll make a motion to. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Schoner, seconded by Mr. Rouse to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any public comments this evening? That we know of?
None that I know of.
Okay. We'll move right into the superintendent's report then.
Yeah, just a couple things before I introduce our Site Logic team. Just to follow up on our budget planning meeting from last week. Just want to say thank you again. I appreciate it. We appreciate the board adding that meeting to your agenda and coming together so we would have that dedicated time just to review and talk about the budget. Obviously that hour or so frees up time on our agenda today so we can dedicate time to the Site Logic, but we're continuing to work on the budget. No major changes have taken place since last week, and we'll have a report in April. And speaking of April, just something that's traditionally done in our district here, that will present the probationary and tenure status update of our staff members. That typically that's done, and to see who's in the first year moving to second year, and so on and so forth. So just those two simple notes. And if there's no questions on those simple things, I'm going to turn it over to our Site Logic team.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for inviting us in tonight, and I guess for the pleasure of working for the district over the past few months on your facility assessment. For those of you I haven't met the Site Logic team yet or had a chance to meet with, Site Logic has been engaged with the district for the last several months in taking a look at your facilities, both the elementary as well as the secondary school, kind of looking at everything blacktop to rooftop, doing an assessment, and kind of helping the district come up with a new vision and long-term plan after your last successful bond and construction project. So kind of making sure that you continue the good work that you've been doing with your facilities. Today is kind of going to be a review of a milestone we've hit in that process. It's called our Comprehensive Assessment Review. So where we're at today is we've gone through and performed our assessments. Our team has developed several facility improvement measures that will be offered to the district for consideration and planning purposes. Things that you may want to implement in the short term, and some things that you may want to look to implement over the long term. But we'll jump right in. So again, we'll start with a brief overview of the facility assessment review. So we've met with the facility committee, gone over this in a little bit more detail, but we'll do a brief overview so we're all kind of on the same baseline there. And then we'll jump into the comprehensive assessment review, which will talk through a few more of the tools we'll bring, our project selection matrix, a really unique tool to help prioritize some of those measures to help you plan for, again, the short, medium, and long term in the district. And then we can wrap up with some potential next steps. And really, during any time today, please feel free to jump in and ask questions. We certainly don't need to wait to the end. So meant to be interactive. So I guess high level, kind of where this started is, again, looking at visioning. So we wanted to identify goals and objectives. It's unique for every district we work with. For NRHEG, we know that you've done a lot of work recently in the district, again, coming off some great bond work and projects you've done. So the vision or the goal was to really say, all right, how do we come up with a plan that sets us on a good course for the next 10 years? What's left to do? So that was kind of the vision. What do we need to take care of? From there, our team kind of dove right in, really focusing on your physical needs. So there we're looking at all of your infrastructure. Again, we didn't tackle any of the larger educational functional needs things. Those are more big programmatic change, things that typically involve bond referendums and that. So we really focused on infrastructure and kind of practical items to take care of. Next, today, we're here to talk about our next step, which is options. So based on that vision and based on our assessment, we've come up with a whole different list of facility improvement measures, which my colleague Matt Connell will introduce to you later on. But those are going to be options that you can look at for improving your infrastructure over the coming years. The next step and kind of culmination of this process is consensus. So once we bring these options to you, the district will have the option to go through and do some workshopping, prioritization, and ultimately form a consensus around kind of your infrastructure and facilities plan for the next 1 to 3, 5 to 10 years. And again, just to highlight today, we're really here kind of this next milestone to speak to the options. So jumping in briefly of our facility assessment reviews. Again, we really focused in on the physical needs. So here we were looking at the quality of your environment. We went through every asset and did a condition assessment. We looked at kind of objectively, so how old is that asset? To use an example of a boiler here, the industry standards are going to rate that boiler to have, say, a 30-year useful life. We looked at how old your boilers were and measured it against that as part of the assessment. But we also took a subjective look, so we wanted to see, just because that boiler says it's 30 years old, what type of condition did our engineers, our analysts actually see it in? And we'll blend those two together to come up with a condition assessment here. So you'll see this color coding repeated throughout some of the data I'm about to show you. This is, believe it or not, I'm going to go through the next probably 15, 20 slides, the abbreviated version of the facility assessment report. I know Mike, Carla, several of the facility committee members got handed a voluminous book with all of the data housed in it that the district can reference over the coming years. But this is meant to kind of provide an overview for us. So I guess I'll pause there and say it's been a couple months, I guess, since we've met and went through the facility assessment review. Were there any questions after you all had a chance to kind of study that report a little bit? All right, we can jump right in then. So starting at the secondary school, our assessment's comprised of these 3 categories. So the first is a comprehensive asset assessment. This really is the report cards, kind of your grading for everything within the district, all your assets from blacktop to rooftop. The next piece that we'll get into will be your indoor environment assessment. So there we looked at indoor air quality, lighting, sound levels, temperature, and humidity, really all the things you see, touch, and feel when you're inside of the building. And third, a category called facility optimization. So we looked at any way that we could potentially optimize and reduce the cost for the district in terms of utility spend or operation and maintenance. I'm going to jump into an overview of the asset assessment. Here you see a nice bar chart kind of depicting several of the assets throughout the building at the secondary school. On my left here, I don't expect everyone to be able to read this, but we have a hot water boiler system here in the first one. The blue bar indicates that average life, kind of the industry life, where it should be rated for, so about 25 years here. The orange bar represents the life of your boiler in the system there. So a good benchmark of kind of how much life you have left, things you may need to plan for in the future. Any red bars you see, of course, you can see that they exceed the recommended life. So those are over the life of the asset. It's time to probably start planning for eventual replacement of that. I like to kind of use the analogy of, say, tires on your car. They all can wear a little bit differently. So tires are going to be rated for, say, 50,000 miles. You're going to want to do some visual inspections, some checks around 40, 50,000 miles to see where you're at. Some will be worn faster than others. Some will have more life. Looking at some of the major, I guess, things that are over life here in the secondary school. You did a major, as part of the recent project, you did a major mechanical system overhaul, so you're really in good shape there. There's a few secondary systems associated with that still will need to come due in the next few years. So you have your variable air volume boxes, which are the systems that actually deliver the air to the classrooms off of the main units. Some of the control systems associated with those. Here's a nice tall one here. This is your domestic water piping. So a much longer useful life on that of 50 years. So that's original. So that's creeping up on 70 years there. Again, something that you'll see that you'll eventually start to have leaks and issues with that down the road. So something you want to plan for. And it is a larger ticket item, of course, to replace all of that. Other things, you've upgraded a lot of the electrical, the main service with past projects. So there's a lot of good work that's been done. Just a few things remaining, like the original electrical distribution panels there. And here's a continuation of some additional assets. So some of these you'll see have a much shorter useful life. So here we're looking more at interior finishes, carpeting, ceiling tile, casework, that sort of thing. They just start out with a lot lower life. And this is our summary chart. So again, kind of referencing back to the asset assessment, the color coding, you can get a good representation here of where everything's at. And again, you've done a lot of work recently, which is why you have about a quarter of the pie here in green in really good shape. Caution, that's kind of the middle of the road, so you still probably have half or more of the useful life, but it's something that you want to, again, even those larger ticket items, consider planning for down the road. And just a little bit of the alert and alarm there to look at. But overall, pretty good looking graph and pretty consistent with what we'd see of a district of buildings of this age and the investments we've made. This is a little more detailed view about how that pie chart was created. Again, I don't expect everyone to be able to read the detail in this, but for each and every asset we've gone through, categorized them, and this kind of is how the color rolls up into that chart. And here I've just filtered to some of the items that popped up in alert and alarm there. And again, we've called out the major ones already, some of the controls, the electrical distribution, and then from about here down is interior finishes. Any questions at the secondary school before I go into the elementary? Yes.
The water piping, is that lead pipes?
Is it lead? It's galvanized, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. So jumping into the elementary, similar chart here. Again, you've done a lot of similar work over there in terms of the mechanical upgrades and work you've done recently. So a lot of those systems are in really good shape here, kind of reset the useful life on those. Some of the secondary systems, again, are overdue, so time to start planning for eventual replacement of those. Same with the controls. Here we have the domestic water piping again, about creeping up on 60 years there. And here continuation, so again, we're looking at some of the shorter items, so interior flooring, casework, adhered ceiling, some older adhered ceiling tiles that are still in place. And here's the summary chart. Again, there's a little bit older assets at the elementary school represented by the chart here, but overall in good shape and about what we would expect with the investments that have been made. And more of the data that rolls up. Next category is indoor environment assessment. So I'll briefly go through some of these at the secondary school. Here you'll see an assessment of your indoor air quality. We looked at ventilation. We took CO2 readings. It's a good proxy to see how much ventilation air is going through the spaces. Yellow means you're average, you're about where we would expect ventilation to come in. There's a few areas that tip to red, which is kind of a tipping point to have our engineers and our analysts look into it a little bit deeper to say what could be going on here. All of these are kind of just above that threshold, tipping from yellow to red. We did look into those. Some of those are just kind of control system items, so we referenced back to some of the older pneumatic systems, some of the older DVC systems in there, and VAV boxes. but nothing of immediate concern to us that jumps out on this here. We also, when we take these readings, we want to kind of take them in their peak condition or when they might be at their worst. So we wait until students have been in the room for a long period of time, air has been able to build up. It's cold outside, so the systems are automatically bringing in kind of their minimum because we want to ensure that during those conditions that you're providing ventilation air. And here again, when we did see some readings in red, we took a closer look. This is kind of looking at this over a little bit more time. So the map you just saw were instantaneous readings. Here's a logger that shows how those levels fluctuated over the day. And again, starting out here in the morning, you're low, but as student levels build up, it increases. But then naturally, as students leave, it starts to dip. That's kind of the trend we want to see. And here, kind of towards the middle part of the day, again, students leave for lunch, a little longer break. The systems are doing what they should, kind of bringing you back down. And again, the classroom loads back up with students in there. So kind of confirmed that, again, it wasn't anything a cause for concern, kind of a natural trend we saw. Here we have one example of your control system where, could look things to do to improve on ventilation. So you have a return air set point, looking at return air. This system is serving multiple classrooms. So that's looking at, it's not getting a true representation of each space with that temperature sensor there. So something you could improve would be to have a CO2 sensor in each space when it's time to renew your control system. Next, we have a lighting level map. So we took light level readings. Here we are looking at lighting quality. So again, kind of like boilers, they have a standard useful life. There is a correct lighting level for classroom environments. We measured those throughout the district. In really good shape here, green is within the range you want to be in. Yellow is where you're slightly above, and red would be where you're a little bit below. So an opportunity, I think, when we see the yellow here, you've done a little bit of LED upgrades already throughout the district. The yellow shows us that if you're a little overlit, you could potentially reduce that lighting level. LED has a lot of benefits in terms of it being a better light source for learning and just we can all tell when you're under the presence of LED light, it's more comfortable and pleasing to be under. It also has a benefit of providing energy savings, so something the district could look to continue doing. Decibel levels, much like light, the noise levels in a classroom can greatly impact the learning environment. So we wanted to make sure any of the mechanical, electrical systems weren't kind of overly noisy. And again, you see a really good map here, really within range throughout the district. Any questions on the indoor environment before we jump to the elementary school? Here another space CO2 and ventilation map. And again, very similar to the secondary school. Some of the areas that peaked just above kind of the range there, we did look into and found a few items on your control system that, again, due to its age, there's some things that could use some tweaking, but overall, no major issues there. Lighting, again, looked really good. You see probably a bit more yellow here on the map at the elementary school. And again, there's a good opportunity for the district to upgrade to LED lighting there. Sound levels in really good shape as well. Next, we go to facility optimization. So what we look to do is quantify your utility spend through both buildings. So we broke that down by electric, water, and fuel for heating. So you can see those costs represented here, kind of total for the district as well as by building. And we also identified a few items to help reduce those costs. So controls are a common theme that keeps coming up. There's some recommissioning things you could do. Your system's not due for replacement yet, the DDC system. However, they kind of require a tune-up after 5 to 7 years, I would say. things start getting out of control and again, less efficient. So a little bit of savings as well as comfort could be improved with some recommissioning there. Here's an example of some of those that our team found. Lighting retrofit is really your big opportunity to reduce cost. You do already have a great program at the secondary school with your solar garden. So unfortunately, you don't get to capture those savings from the LED lighting because you're getting such a benefit from that already. Or at the elementary school here, you could achieve pretty significant annual savings by upgrading to LED lighting. In addition to the recommissioning and LED lights, there are some opportunities to kind of improve your building envelope. So anything you can do to seal up air leaks and air infiltration, again, will help kind of with that fuel and heating costs. Water efficiency is another one we looked at. So a lot of original plumbing fixtures within the building, those can be kind of retuned and calibrated to be brought back to their original specifications and achieve some water efficiency. All right, so any questions on the facility assessment review side before I turn it over to Matt?
All right, thank you, Jake. All right, so please, again, do not hesitate to interrupt me or jump in with questions. My feelings will not be hurt. This thing to work, maybe not. Jake, you broke my... Technology. All right. So just a very brief reminder, right? So this is your community, your vision. You're the school board. You make decisions. We're here to help guide, advise, answer questions. But ultimately, we're not here to make any decisions. That's your guys' job. So just kind of keep that in mind. Ultimately, we want to come to a program, a project, a 10-year plan that it's community supported, which your community has supported some of those things in the past. Technically correct, right? And then fiscally responsible for the district and for the board itself. And so before I put any budgeted numbers or potential project numbers in front of you guys, I want you to understand exactly how we come to those numbers. So we call it a triangulated approach, right? So these numbers are all in. So it's gonna include general costs, soft permitting costs, any costs that you see associated with implementing one of these facility improvement measures is included in that budgeted cost number, including what would be our fees as well. So you might hear us refer to those budgeted numbers as ROM, or rough order of magnitude, and that's what we call a triangulated approach. So we have local databases for construction pricing, right? Your RS means is a typical standard one that's used. And then the second piece, prong, is internal database. So at SiteLogic, we implement over $300 million in construction annually in the Midwest, specifically all at K-12 public school districts. So we know what these local contractors are going to be charged, and we're very confident in those numbers for what those local contractors are going to be charging for ultimately implementing those improvement measures. And then the last one, the last prong there is our architects, our engineers, and then our program manager, project manager, actually sit down and go line by line. So they, along with our facility analysts that have actually been into your facility, so they sit line for line and take a look. All right, this is the improvement measure. Here's what the budgeted number tells us. Are there any nuances in this facility that might change this number, right? And so they get into a little bit more detail, making sure that that budgeted number matches any potential nuances that are at your facility. And then lastly, the numbers that you will see are budgeted for summer 2023 construction. So obviously we're in March. There's really no opportunity to do any large-scale infrastructure construction projects in the summer of this year. So that would not do you any good if we gave you pricing for this summer. So everything you will see, is projected out to summer 2023 construction. And I know I just threw a lot of stuff at you. Jake, please add anything, but if there's any questions, please let me know.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of preface and say what we're going to share is, again, in context of helping you come up with a master plan. So we're not here today to present you a potential project to recommend doing one thing over the other. We're here to kind of present to you information, tools, and next steps to help you come up with your plan. You know, if we don't see what you'll go through and you'll see this, there are needs within the district. There are things that you can look to do in the short term, but we don't see any major need right now to say, run out and run another referendum or do a big project. There's things that you can look at tackling kind of over several years to take care of things.
Yeah, please.
I got one question. So you're saying these are prices for the 2023 construction year. What's the possibility of those numbers going up or down between now and then?
Great question. So, as a lot of you know, the construction market is really hard to predict right now. So we've been doing, part of my job is doing a lot of that research, right? So we have contingencies built in, we have escalations built in, and we have market adjustments built in. So our engineers, our pricing team has done a lot of deep dives on what stuff has gone up and down a lot in the last year, 2 years based on tariffs, whatever it may be, right? Demand, supply. So mechanical stuff, heavy metal stuff was way hot, right? It was 20-30% higher than what we were expecting. Some stuff, you know, a lot of parking lot stuff, there wasn't a huge change. So we've done a lot of research and tried to dive in to answer those questions to the best of our ability. But if we were able to have that, you know, that crystal ball, if you will, you know, I would not be sitting in front of you here today. I'd have a lot more money. But we can't, bottom line, we can't tell the future. However, we are very confident in these numbers that we do put together because we put a lot of time and a lot of research into, you know, forecasting out what those budgets are going to look like, because that's what we do at every single school district. So we're always forecasting out 9, 12, 18, 20 months of construction. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Unfortunately, there's not a set answer to it, but you know, just know that we're working very, very hard to make sure that these numbers are as accurate as humanly possible.
Yeah. As Matt said, we put a lot of adjustments in to match the market conditions. We also, again, as you look to create a long-term plan, our kind of standard is to escalate those 2023 numbers 5% per year, just as it is a baseline. If the district came to us 3 years from now and said, hey, you know what, we really would like to tackle that domestic water piping and some of those VAV boxes, we would take a fresh look to say, okay, 3 years of market conditions have changed, right? How does that number with the escalation compare? What do we know now that we didn't know back then, and update it? However, that number will be fairly close at that point.
Perfect. Please jump in with any other questions too as they come up. So again, just getting back to these pricing numbers, these are not quotes, right? So we haven't gone out to contractors and said, what would it take, for example, to replace the ceiling at NRHEG Library or Meeting Center, right? We haven't done that yet. These are professional estimates from our internal engineering, architectural, and construction team. And then ultimately what you'll see a lot of too is you'll see like an E.1A, an E.1B, an E.1C. Well, ultimately it's the same type of solution, right? It's to fix the same problem, but it's a good, a better, and a best potential solution. So 3 different reinvestment levels, obviously cheap, most expensive, right? And so, but you ultimately will be able to see, you know, there's 3 potential solutions to the same problem, but you can pick the one that fits best, whether it's best on cost, best on, you know, environment, whatever it may be. You guys are the decision makers to pick, you know, ultimately what one, good, better, or best, could go to address the one solution. So does that also make sense? So we'll never come in and say this is the only way to do it, right? Maybe there is a certain situation where, yeah, there might be only one way to do it, but we try to bring multiple options to the same problem. And so now I'm not going to be expecting you to read this, but eventually you guys will have a printed out version of this. But this is just to give you a little bit of a teaser as to what that project selection matrix looks like. So I'm going to zoom in. But ultimately, I'm just going to work left to right here. So you'll see facility, right? So what facility is this actual improvement taking place at? Scenario, we'll get to that at a later time. FIM code. So A, C, that's your accessibility, controls, plumbing. It's going to be one of the 16 categories that our engineers have put together, put in front of you before. And then A.1 is going to be A.1 no matter where you look, right? So A.1 is always going to be providing lift for the ADA compliance. And so that FIM code will correlate in all of our different documents. It'll be the same throughout. First will be that short description. So it's a really short description as to what that facility improvement measure is doing. And then the ideas and opportunities column is just a little bit more of an expanded description as to what's happening with that improvement measure.
And this is one of the tools that we'll use in our next step, the consensus part workshopping, to work with district administration, facilities committee, whomever is going to be part of that group, to look at all the potential improvement measures and match those up with a plan for the district.
Perfect, thanks, Jake. And then next, kind of that next column there is the existing condition. Again, just a little bit more detail as to how that asset currently is today. And then again, this ties back, really heavy back to the facility stuff that Jake was talking about earlier. So how long is that equipment supposed to last? How old is it, right? And then a quick calculation for, all right, how much life is left. And then asset condition, this ties right back to that asset condition report card that Jake was referred to earlier. So you'll see your lighting, if it's all alert, it's going to be alert here too. Priority, I will get to that actually very shortly. And so then funding section here, utility. So this number would represent an annual savings number. So if it's this is 10, there's some here, it's a great example. So there's just some of your controls. So there were some efficiencies potentially for some of the controls improvements. So for this one, for example, we're saying, roughly we could save you, if you implemented that improvement measure, you'd save around $1,350 annually on your utility bill, just because of some efficiencies that could take place with that improvement. And then O&M stands for operations and maintenance. So if there's any operations and maintenance savings that are associated with it too, you'll see a value there, obviously totaled up. And then the last one there is utility rebate. The most common one here is lighting, right? So if you do a LED lighting contract, same with solar is a great example too. You guys got a massive rebate with the solar project that you did. So it's any utility incentive that would be associated with that improvement measure. And lighting is the best. Lighting and solar are the two best examples where utilities provide those types of rebates. And then the last two columns you'll see is cost and project here. And so that's one of the things that is in this tool is I have it hidden right now, but there's a project here. And so while we're workshopping with yourselves or your facility committees, we can toggle stuff in and out of years. So maybe it's a much lower priority for you. You guys say, we're going to tackle that in 2028. Quickly type in 2028, projects this number with those escalated factors that Jake was just talking about, and puts that into a budgeted year for when that project is potentially going to happen. Just so then that helps your team, your finance team budget, right? Submit that 10-year LTFM MVE plan so that you're putting actual, construction 2028 numbers there rather than, sometimes throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. And then the last column there is simple payback. It's a very simple calculation, taking the cost divided by total potential savings. And so if that improvement can pay for itself in a certain amount of time, you'll see a value here, and that's how many years ultimately it would take to pay for itself.
The other thing too that we'll look to do in addition to the construction year, working with you guys to get feedback on which year those go into, we'll also then work with Carla and her team to match that to a potential funding source. So again, there's many different funding levers that the district has at its disposal. You can look at when you want to pull those levers based on the project, based on what you maybe have coming multiple years from now. It's really a good way to plan long term.
Thanks, Jake. Any questions as it relates to this tool? I know you guys don't have it in front of you, so you'll probably have more questions once you do get it printed in front of you, but we can always come back to it too if you do have questions. So the next tool that we have is we call our Prioritization Majors. So ultimately it's to help your key stakeholders prioritize all these needs or potential improvements that we bring forward. So quickly, nothing new here, right? So facility, what facility is that improvement measure taking place at? What category is it in? One of those 16 categories again?
Yeah, and you'll notice here, sorry Matt, but you'll notice here right away, hazardous, 1, 2, 3, 4, well, there's elementary. And here we're calling out asbestos abatement. We're not saying that is a hazard right now, it needs to be taken care of. What we did by calling this out here is a good example, joints and pipe wrap. So again, I go reference back to the domestic water piping, right? There's some asbestos insulation on that piping. So we're saying when you do decide to change that piping, we want this to be at the top of the priority list because it's something you're gonna have to do in conjunction with that. So that is why those are grouped up to the top there. This doesn't say right now that, oh my gosh, you need to run out and prioritize abating all this asbestos. It's undisturbed where it is. We're just identifying that and linking it to other potential scopes down the road.
Thanks, Jake. Then the next column here is So the hazardous, so it has your FIM code, right? So your 8.1 is going to always be 8.1 with the lit, right? So the FIM description and then the cost associated with that improvement. But ultimately, where the magic happens on this tool is we have a series of categories. And so just keep in mind these categories can be removed, they can be added to, they can be eliminated, whatever it may be. But these are kind of the set that we start with pretty much every single school district. And so I'll kind of go through them, but let me know if you guys have any questions. So current condition ties right back to your ACAs, right? So if it's acceptable, it's going to be a really low score here. If it's alert or alarm, it's going to be a high score, high priority. Interconnection with other systems, that was the exact example that Jake was just using. I like to use a ventilation example, but if you were to do a complete ventilation rehaul in here, you're taking down lights, you're taking down ceilings, maybe those lights and ceilings need to be replaced in the next 5 years anyway. Contractors are mobilized and out here. Might make sense to do that all at the same time since they're all here. So if there's any interconnection and any efficiency that is provided between the two FIMs. Educational impact, pretty simple. Does it affect how curriculum is delivered, right? So is lighting, improving the lighting in the spaces, including ventilation in the spaces, you know, updating the casework, carpet, some of those things actually affect how curriculum is delivered. Health, safety, and security. For example, secure entrance. If you don't have a secure entry on your school building, and you know, community members can just walk right in willy-nilly without checking by a security person or a secretary desk or something to that effect, you know, that is obviously increasing the security in the facility. Student and community perception. So I like to use, you know, boiler. A boiler is not a super sexy item, right? It's an expensive item, but I can pretty much promise you your community member had no idea that you replaced your boiler unless it was included in the referendum, right? However, if you did do a secure entry or you updated your terrible parking lots if they were in terrible shape or your sidewalks, well, that's something that your community and your staff is just going to notice because they see it on a daily basis. So is it something that, you know, your student and community would actually even see took place? Return on investment, pretty straightforward there too. You know, does this improvement measure pay for itself over time? Code concern, you know, accessibility, fire alarms, life safety systems. Are there any code concerns associated where we're not up to code now with that specific improvement? And then the last one there that you see a 0% on is district priority. So, you know, one exercise we will do with key stakeholders is do a line by line prioritization where we'll sit down with key stakeholders and ask you, you know, how important is this improvement measure to the district? You know, our engineers, and we might think, you know, this would maybe be a headache if I was running this facility, but well, we're not here running the facility on a daily basis. You will have more insight, and so you can actually, we'll have you put in values to each of these to then become part of the equation.
Yeah, so I really like this tool because it puts the district completely in the driver's seat in terms of prioritizing your facility infrastructure. I've gone through and asked our engineering team, our architects to kind of say, if this was your building, right, based on your professional opinion, how would you prioritize the work that needs to be done here? We provide that as a baseline for you guys, but as Matt said, our next step when we go into workshopping is to roll up our sleeves, put you guys in the driver's seat to say, okay, how do you want to prioritize these? We're here as a professional backstop as a partner to say, hey, if you want to defer that boiler 8 years down the road, you can ask us, hey, can we do that? What shape is that boiler? And we'll provide you our best feedback there.
Any questions as it relates to this tool? Awesome. So, again, as Jake mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, our engineering development team took a very specific look at the deferred maintenance type needs. And ultimately at the secondary and elementary school, you can see how these needs roll up in range of priority. So your low range are 0 to 1, all the way up to your immediate, which is 4.1 to 5. And then the due or overdue number, we're not necessarily saying, you know, you have to go out and do $11 million worth of work right now. That's not at all what we're saying. But, you know, based on our professional opinion, you know, it takes the $9.5 million number and the $1.5 million number, so the high priority and immediate priority needs, and we kind of classify that as those needs are due or overdue, so those are the ones that are past their life expectancy that, you know, should start to be a part of that LTFM 10-year plan.
And again, you guys have done a lot of work recently, so you know, this is a large number, but these are things to look at in the context of, again, a long 10-year plan of needs. So again, immediately, We'll get into a breakdown of kind of some where these are divided right now. Again, this is our first blush. We're not here to recommend and say cement this in stone that these are your needs. We still want to prioritize and go through that with you. But again, overall, you're in good shape as you stand right now. You know, and you have the ability to plan to tackle these needs in the future.
And then here, just to show you graphically again, it's the same information that's in the table, just gives you a little bit of a visual look at where those needs lie across the two facilities. And then the last thing we did was we broke those needs out by category. So again, these are one of those 16 categories, whether it's accessibility, controls, plumbing, whatever it may be. So you can see, you know, kind of how those totals roll up, around $6.5 million at the elementary school, and then 5.5 at the secondary school. Jake, I don't know if you want to touch on any of the higher ones.
Yeah, so a couple that jump out right away as big ones are life safety systems. So there's really two different potential improvements in each building that comprise those. One of them is, in each building, is an upgrade of your fire alarm system itself. That's something that, unfortunately, technology-based, it has a little bit of a shorter useful life, so they're typically rated around 10 years or so. So both of your systems at the elementary and secondary school, it's time to start planning for the replacement of those. I believe those are around, we've budgeted around $500,000 a piece. The bigger part of that number is kind of an optional, again, going back to the good, better, best, an option for the district is to do a fire suppression or sprinkler-based system. That's a much larger ticket item. That's like a $1 million a piece, but that's not necessarily a need so much as a potential option. So wanted to address that one. You know, another big one there, the exterior envelope and roofing. So that's really some of your window systems. Again, just based on their age, they're starting to age out, so those are larger ticket items. As well, there's a large roofing section here at the elementary school that again will need to be planned for down the road as well.
All right, and then I'll hand it back to Jake.
So again, we just threw a lot of information at you all. And pause again for any questions before I can kind of go into a little bit overview of next steps.
When Carla and I met with Jake, some of the things that stuck out at me and helped me here with some numbers, but basically we have about $300,000 a year in LTFM. So, you know, that's just kind of a threshold or keep that in mind. I think the other things to keep in mind too, that in this $12 billion, when I started absorbing a little bit more of this, I thought, no, that's not bad. If we had $12 billion given to us tomorrow, we could fix, this is my terms again, we could fix everything in this district and our buildings would be pretty close to good as new, right? That, again, maybe there's some disagreement with that, but in the grand scheme of things, or the big picture of things, that $12 billion, again, is best, remember that. And some of these things that we are working on, we saw the picture of the gym lobby entrance, that's going to be happening here, hopefully any week, someday soon. But you know, that's all included in that. So we do have a good grasp, a good start on a lot of that, and really what we're looking at is, in my mind, some pretty good news that a lot of this stuff has been taken care of and has been worked on and continues to be monitored now.
To add to a little bit of your math doing there though too, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounded like even though you're saying immediate concerns or some of the higher areas of concern, you still talked about a 10-year plan even in that area. So rounding down to $10 million worth, $1 million a year, 300,000 of it covered through LTFM.
Right.
You know, so we can chip away at some
Right.
of those projects and actually,
Right.
which should be doing someplace along the line,
Right.
there'll be a large,
The rebates, the
Right.
loans against the,
Yep.
the savings.
Correct,
cost
yeah.
savings.
So-
Another good example with the retrofit lighting for this building, and I'm using my memory on the numbers, but a $95,000 project, that would save roughly $10,000 from the general fund. So,
Right.
and I know we talked about that in the past, but
Right.
those are things that are part of that thinking and part of that whole process as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's kind of the methodology or the next step is to look at that annual allocation that you have. How, again, based on your priorities and based on some of the priority items identified here by our professional team, what you want to allocate that funding to, and then as you alluded to, you know, eventually you're going to have to solve for that delta, right? And maybe that's carrying over some LTFM funds from year to year when you don't have to use all 300. But eventually that 12 million, again, that escalates, that grows, that it will at some time come due for a larger project. But again, you're just coming off of one. Again, it's good news here. There's no need to immediately go out and do something like that. Yeah. So that's really kind of our next step here, and we'll take direction from the district, Mike, Carl administration, on when you want to begin this process in terms of workshopping. So we're here to assist the district further with this when you would want to, but really it's rolling up our sleeves and looking at that advanced prioritization and the project selection matrix, matching those to project years and available funding sources as the next step. As Matt said, our role in all this is here tonight to sell your project. We want to listen, not tell you what to do. We'll provide you a backstop, help guide you, but we're not going to decide anything for you today. I mentioned all the available funding levers. This chart is a lot, but it is all the different funding options. So in addition to your LTFM revenue, for example, parking lots were mentioned, and I know that's something that was identified in the assessments and in conversations with the district, that some things that could be improved in the future. There is a special funding source for that, abatement bonds, so that's something that you can do to kind of help take care of that outside of your regular LTFM revenue, should it be something the district prioritizes. You know, and a lot of other funding sources in there, so you mentioned energy sources, as well as some other levies. But again, that's all part of the process to help identify those and which measures they go in which years. And then ultimately, when we complete the workshopping, the prioritization, what you'll have is a nice 10-year plan laid out based upon, here's an example of the school district where they had a little bit of catch-up work to do. So they did need to do a bigger project in the beginning, but after that, you can see they went from spending a couple $1 million in these first years to just utilizing their LTFM revenue to tackle projects for the remainder of their allocation. So what we want to create is a nice smooth chart like this that shows you using your funding to tackle needs. You know, if you do have some that spill over and there's a delta of need for funding beyond that, figure out around the time frame when you would want to budget for that, and again, help you lay out that plan.
We've been keeping roughly that 30% kind of that fund balance in the LTFM funds as well, correct? That
Yeah, like right now,
300?
we ended this last year at 233,000 there. So we talked about, like, one of his examples was this roofing project in this building's $500,000 in a few years. So if we could just try to build that savings account up a little bit and plan for that.
We started at 250-ish and then added roughly this current budget to it as well.
No, where we are sitting right now, if all of our projects go through, we probably will not be able to put any more money into that savings account.
For the
Current
21-22
year,
school year.
Right. And we haven't finalized what we want to do next year, so we could plan to save some, so.
A lot of information.
It is.
It's impressive. I hope you had a computer program that helped you along generating that.
Many coworkers, many programs. Yeah.
It's impressive, and thank you for that. And it will mean more when we get right into the workshop area of okay, explain this project and the,
Yep.
tie it to the area and prioritize it. That'll be more of the excitement. Here it's kind of just, well, the color coding helps us that there are no real fires to put out, but good stuff.
In the initial, or our last conversation too, we talked about again, when kind of the timeline for that knowing that the, kind of the busy season is coming for many of you, that this would probably be something like a June, that we'd sit down again and kind of go through that next step, that workshopping, or,
So the workshop is for the full board, not just for a committee?
that's up to us to decide.
And that is one thing we'd like input on, I guess, as far as, you know, we have our Buildings and Grounds Committee, but feel free to change that around when it gets to be this time, and or at least think about it. We can, I don't know how you feel. Do you have an opinion on that,
I
Joanne?
could go either way, honestly.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
I mean,
Well, can't anybody come to a committee meeting?
Absolutely,
You don't
yeah.
have to be on that committee. I
Right,
guess.
it's open to the public as far as that goes, so, yeah, obviously board members would be welcome there too.
We just probably have to do some, the posting and whatnot, if we know we're having more than 3 board
Sure.
members being present, but some logistical things like that. Again, it's kind of
we have
interesting.
one
It
that's
is.
on this meeting already?
3.
It's interesting stuff. I would think you'd want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is some, I guess everybody has their different level of interest, but in my book, it's some of the more interesting
Yeah.
work as
Yeah,
a
it
board
is.
member, or rewarding, exciting.
Okay.
So yeah, we can keep determined on that, and give us a guideline in your perfect world. Where would you like to have us have this type of work done? Or in-
It really differs by districts, however
Okay.
you'd like to make decisions. And if you want to do that as a committee, as a group, it really makes no difference to us, so we're happy to accommodate either way. I will say that the sessions, typically we like to keep them to about 90 minutes apiece, because like you said, it's a lot. Any more than that, it just becomes too much. And
Right.
so sometimes if we don't get through it all, we'll do multiple sessions, so that's something to consider as well. If you're gonna bring in multiple people, if they want to participate potentially in 2-3 sessions, to do that. And we also work with districts sometimes where, again, we'll work with a smaller group, and then they'll maybe present their recommendation to a larger stakeholder group, right? So this is kind of what we came up with, this is our plan, and you can reevaluate that, maybe get some feedback, and then if you have to go back into the more detailed revisions with that's an option as well.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add from a timeline perspective is, you know, the MDE LTFM submittal deadline of June 31st, right, so July 1st. So that's just kind of the only other timing mechanism that would potentially go into, you know, that workshopping piece.
But again, if you have your plan, your project selected for this year, it sounds like, so I think, you know, future considerations, we certainly want to have it hit by next July. You want your plan in place, but if Carla sounds like she spent that money already this year, so.
That's really what he's getting at. You guys don't even need for what?
But no, there's no time constraint as far as we're concerned either. We'll be here if you call us in June, we'll be here if you call us in September to do this work.
Okay.
You know, I would say the one thing to look at would be, that I would prioritize if it was my building, I really would be to look at the lighting piece, because that's, again, Mike said, that's savings to the general fund. So that's savings that, if you delay that, if you waited a year, let's say, that's, you know, potentially $30,000 that you missed out on in savings, so that would be a timing consideration.
It's my gut feeling, you know, within the next couple of months, actually, I would think would be a realistic. I mean, we don't want to put it on the back shelf and let it get dusty either. I think if we're in the program, we want to keep moving forward with it, even if the answer is we do nothing. We want to get that plan in place. That was the objective of the.
I'm not on the committee, but I'd be happy to do it at the board level.
Sure. Yep.
To the extent that, I don't know what others think.
Rick, Jake's original timeline had for you to meet in April.
Sure.
We just didn't know if that was realistic with
Right.
When
the
is the
busy
field
time
coming?
coming.
Yeah, that's the
That's the
tricky
question everybody's
question,
asking.
and I don't know that, I mean,
And to Matt's point, when I created the original timeline in April, we weren't sure if there were going to be any needs that you would maybe want to think about prioritizing for that July deadline.
Right.
But again, where you're at in a good spot now,
Yeah.
you have more options.
Let's go back to your system of, you know, putting it out there as a potential dates, I think would probably be the feeling, and we'll perhaps put it out to all board members and see what kind of interest level there is. If we have 6 out of 7 board members interested, we call it a special board meeting. If only the 3 committee people respond of interest, it's a committee meeting.
Right.
We'll adjust it to the level of interest from the board, and please feel that it's exciting to have you involved and participate, because it is a big subject. So.
The other thing I didn't mention yet tonight is, again, there's a lot of potential projects on here, a lot of things that, quite frankly, the district doesn't need SiteLogic's help to do and implement. So we talked about like the lighting, for instance, or parking lots. We don't provide a ton of value as a large architectural, engineering, construction management firm in helping you repave your parking lots. Pretty simple for you guys to go out and do that at this district and take care of it. So again, as we're looking to build out this project, we're not looking to select things that we would be going to a project with. We're hoping to be your long-term partner. So again, when eventually some of those bigger term needs come through, when you have a lot of complexity, that's where we can provide value to it all. So
Appreciate that.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To the administrative reports.
Yeah, we'll go through our administrative reports coming in. Nick, I think you're up first on the slideshow.
All right.
Mr. Turns.
Once again, at the very beginning, I've linked our March newsletter. Our March newsletter had a lot in it, so feel free to check that out. It's linked there. Our PTO donations, there was one thing that is in the board report, some waddle chairs was noted there, but also our PTO donated money to purchase meals for the secondary conferences in March, and they're going to be doing the same for conferences over there again in April. Tomorrow night we have our Bridges and Open House, or Bridges and Kindergarten Open House. I've linked the document that we created. Mr. Myhawk was generous enough to find kind of a nice packet or pamphlet that helps promote our Bridges and Kindergarten program from another district, and I was able to mirror that with some of our district's key points, including, and there's a part there that talks about our open house tomorrow night. So there'll be several of us here tomorrow evening from 3:30 to 5:30 welcoming and recruiting next year's kindergarten class. We're in the process of planning for Camp Panther. Again, for this summer. Camp Panther is that program that we run for students to make sure that we hopefully prevent that summer slide in reading and math. One big adjustment that we made for this year is that we are going back to a 4-week program, which is historically what it was. Last year it was a 6-week program. The decision was made to go 6 weeks to kind of beef things up a little bit due to COVID. But we felt that was a lot for the kids, a lot for our staff, and so we're going to go back to a 4-week program and hope to get more consistent attendance. The week of February 28th through March 4th, we wrapped up I Love to Read Month with several activities. We had some Dr. Seuss dress-up days. We had our annual green eggs and ham breakfast that Friday, and then our secondary students that are part of Readers Theater were able to come over and join us. And then there are also some there'll be some pictures later of the green eggs and the ham breakfast. So, just wanted to make note that March 7th through 11th was School Social Worker Week, and I know that a lot of what I do, Brooke and Brooke and Bree and I are in the loop on things with some of our students that need a lot of support, and so I value them quite a bit, so I just wanted to publicly acknowledge the work that they do for our students and our partners and me personally. And then lastly, some Panther Pride updates. We had our second round of school-wide behavior instruction on responsibility on March 11th, and so there's a couple pictures of that. And actually, I'll come over here. Kind of want to go up a little bit, Sue. Yeah, if you have it on your device, it might be easier to see. But this picture here is Mrs. Kluko. She teaches 4th grade for us, and there were 5 students, high school students, that came over that day that she actually had as students when they were in the elementary. So that's why we took that picture there with Mrs. Kluko and her former students who are now seniors. And then the rest of the slides are just some different pictures. That one there is some pictures from our green eggs and ham breakfast, celebrating the end of Dr. Seuss Week. And so yeah, it's been really busy, but a lot of fun.
Thank you, Mr. Burns.
One more thing that didn't get on there because this was submitted to Sue prior to the news I have. We have our family literacy night coming up on the 28th, and that is in conjunction with our title funds that we receive. Part of receiving title funds is we have to put together a family literacy night. Historically, what I'm understanding, that hasn't been particularly well attended. Update from Sarah Erke this morning, we're at 90 plus people registered to come to that. So they've got a luau theme. We're having Moe make some food for us, but it looks like it's going to be a really fun time here. We don't have school on the 28th, but it's in the evening from 5 to 7. So excited to report we're going to have a lot of people in the building that night. So.
All right, Mr. Bunn, thank you.
All right, we're almost to the end here of third quarter. So we'll be, that'll be just right around the corner. Just an FYI, and it's not in the report, but the kids going to Costa Rica leave this week. So lots of nervousness in the Bunn household as 2 of them are going, but it's going to be wonderful. So we're excited for those opportunities for kids. You know, we had some pretty great success in terms of the winter seasons ending. Wrestlers who placed at the state tournament, Annabelle Petzinger, which of course you're aware, I shared last time, it was the first time the girls competed against other girls at the state tournament, and she placed 3rd. Ralph Wrestler and Makota Miskin both were 2nd, and Makota's was the last match, and it was the very last overtime that you could get, and we just fell a little short, but really awesome experience, and the kids really represented us well. There, you know, I shared some photos. Some of them were ones that we took, and some were from some other folks that we got some action shots, like the one of Ralph there, who's won Dozanco's when he pinned his kid in the semifinals. So just like I said, a great experience. We have now last year I don't think they did it because of COVID, but we have a Trig Star competition, and so our Trig kids go and compete, and Eva Wayne, awesome, 3rd all around, so very neat, and the team also placed 3rd, so very cool event. National Honor Society just did our blood drive, and so that went on, so hats off to Liz Sternagel and all the NHS kids that helped with the blood drive. And then our girls basketball, they also did really well. They lost in the subsection final to Lake Crystal, but very good job. So, and the last thing that I included, and you can't see it that far away, there's no way, but included our Pbis expectations. I told you the teachers were going to do some videos. So tomorrow morning, Pbis team meets. We're going to talk about when to roll those videos out to the kids. So each one ranges from 30 seconds to a minute and a half, depending on what expectation that they were talking about or doing. So with that, that's what I have. Questions?
That's the best result we've had in TrigStar for a long time, I think. I mean, it's really,
Right.
really great results. That's a tough contest.
I think, what was it, the 1 year when Jenny Stays was here, we won it the 1 year
Okay.
and lined out in the hallway as a TrigStar kids
Yeah,
came back. But yeah, that's
That was a while ago.
been a while, so.
That's a good, strong family tree.
You're all good at math, those routes.
I see how you gimped along with that recognition, Mr. Board Member.
All right, thank you, Mr. Buck.
And Mara?
All right, so I have kind of random, a whole bunch of stuff in a row, so I tried to put it in the most organized way possible. We're doing a lot of things last week and this week actually, as far as planning for the rest of the year and in the fall, along with MCA testing being our best friend right now. So actually planning for fall workshop, that should say through 22. That's tomorrow. The three of us are planning, and then in conjunction with staff development committee, we'll get that finalized because they're looking to have that be ready sooner than we thought. So we want to be on board with that. Cultural competency, if you hear of it coming up, it will be addressed during the 22-23 school year. It's just a requirement for relicensure. None of our staff members need it for relicensure this year, but I did look into that with the state, and I happen to already know one of the guys that's an approved instructor, so he was busy the March early out date, and we just decided that if we're to start a new topic like that, would be best to get that with the new school year. So they don't spell it out for you on the MDE website, they make you dig for it, so it's nice to have that connection. And then as far as the workshop, some of the things that we need to consider is just a general needs assessment. It feels like we're kind of all over the place with staff development and professional development, so I'd like to see that be more themed next year and purposeful. So that'll be part of our discussion. As far as the mentor program, virtual meetings for March versus in person, they're only 30 minutes long, so you can fit a whole lot more in there if you're not traveling. Part of the agreement was that meetings would be monthly, either virtual or in person, so the last two have been in person, so this one is virtual. Focused on progress and reflection, and then just looking for that program to strengthen and take off next year. This year we kind of got it started in March, so as we were moving, we're building it, so I'm excited to see what that looks like next year. And then curriculum, Dave had me reach out to our McGraw-Hill rep. She sent us a whole bunch of samples. They're in the hands of all of the science teachers. It's looking like we would stick with what we have, get a more current date. There's one they actually use the term retired, which I found kind of offensive, but we can't get it in digital, print, anything. So that'll be the one that's not optional at all. And then the rest of them, the digital subscriptions are expiring in 2022. So those are generally 6-year licenses.
6 or 7, yeah, depends on which one it was or what.
Yep, so we're looking at that, and then I'm filling out, I just threw it on here, I'm filling out a grant for the LLI Gold Kit at the elementary. We had purchased those for the elementary at the beginning of this year, And we didn't purchase the gold kit because we didn't think our kids would advance so quickly. So they've advanced, the 4th and 5th graders are making a ton of progress. And so they're running out of books that still challenge them, and but they still got a gap towards grade level. So part of that is interest. The gold kit, which hopefully we received the grant money for, has topics that are aimed for 4th and 5th graders. So we have some kids that are still reading at that 3rd grade level, and they're kind of baby topics, so they're not as interested. So they really aim to please, I guess. As far as access testing and EL profiles, I threw that on here. Testing's happening right now. Happened today. It's going to happen tomorrow. I'm doing that just with the 5 kids that we're testing. I threw a link to the EL profiles because I wasn't sure if I'd shared that before. That's something I'll continue to do for all of our EL students, as long as I told Mike or Dave, as long as the number doesn't exceed 20, because then it's a lot. So just a little snapshot for kids so teachers can see kind of where they're at. It started with a comment from a specialist actually that just said, hey, it's the next quarter and I'm getting 3 students that speak limited English. What's been done for them? Well, a lot's been done for them, but how is that communicated to you? So it's a place for staff to put things on there, a place for students to put things on there that work for the kids. Sort of like an IEP, but not. And then I'm working with Heather Harms to see how we can best partner with special ed. Right now they're kind of chasing each other's tails, so we want to look for a way. It's looking like writing is where that would fit, and guided reading, just making the connection between general ed and special ed and not making it 2 separate places that don't talk to each other. And hopefully kids will progress further. As far as the Pbis at the secondary, we meet tomorrow morning at 7:30. Videos are complete. Rollout is to be determined. So some of them are pretty good. You guys should watch them. And then just kind of overall, we're getting that committee started as far as behavior, and there's a lot of big ideas. So part of that is just the mindset shift that needs to happen with staff. There's a lot of staff behaviors that need to be addressed before we can address some of the student behaviors. So some things that just kind of go on and it's just how that person is or whatever. So there's some big ideas and there's some things with Pbis that you have to believe that it will work for it to be successful. So that doesn't happen overnight. And then I just left this slide here. It's something that Nick and I kind of talk about a lot, but it's not from Pbis, but it's something to get your mind just into that thinking pattern. So if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. And if a child doesn't know how to behave, what do we? We instantly go to, you're not doing this, so you're punished. So just something to think about. Why can't we finish the last sentence as automatically as we do the others? We would never punish a student for not being able to read. So just something to think about. That's really all I have right now.
Good.
We'll have an update on the fall workshop tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mark.
Are there any board members that would like to make any comments this evening?
I'd like to say one thing. This might come out as a personal thing too, but I hope everybody has seen that military appreciation board because it is super cool. When I have been in the building, I do see people looking at it and people are commenting to me on it. And people are seeing, of course, my son's name on there, so they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. So on behalf, I'd like to thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. And that will be part of our open house, the secondary open house, and a little bit of a unveiling or. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Anything else? If not, our regularly scheduled board meeting will be Tuesday, April 19th in the Media Center in Richland. I'm saying that right, correct? Tuesday, April 19th.
Correct.
Okay, that takes us to the consent agenda items, and Mr. Mayak, would you introduce those, please?
Yeah, disclaimer here of sorts that the board members have been provided with the background information for all items listed on the consent agenda. These items will be acted upon with one vote without discussion. If a board member wants to discuss any item, we'll pull that from the consent agenda and vote on it separately. And just a note that due to the late notice of the para tentative agreement being added to the agenda, that typically would be under the consent agenda, but we have listed that again later in the agenda under finance. Before you vote on that, we will recognize our donations. We have a NRHEG PTO donated $143.86 for the wobble chairs that Mr. Jurin spoke of. Kind of excited to see what next month. That last month you had a catchy term, or what, you got some,
Oh, what was that? Yeah.
That's something.
Oh, that was the Yacker Tracker.
The Yacker Tracker. The Yacker Tracker, now this year, or this month, we have the wobble chairs, so excited to see what next spring.
Pretty well covered.
Next
Never
month
know in
brings.
the elementary.
Right. We had $2,700, $2,800 just shy from the Panther Wrestling Club for our wrestling warm-ups. And then the CTE money that you see there for $12,800, that's not a donation, but rather that's a, and Dave, please jump in here too if you can explain. The career and tech ed monies or funds that through the state and South Central, the region, there are funds available for career and tech ed. There was some unspent money that we became aware of. And so Ms. Wigman, Mr. Rook, Mr. Sorum, Ms. Dela Cruz, the career and tech ed type people, kind of talked through that we could have one request from the district, and there was a curriculum basically that Ms. Wigman will work mainly with, but it will be throughout the career and tech ed too, and that request was granted from South Central Service Co-op, correct? Yep. For $12,800. So just bringing that out and recognizing that substantial funds coming into the district and supplementing and improving our education. So with that, then I would ask the board to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So move.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Mueller, seconded by Ms. Maloney to approve the consent agenda items as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Mayak had stated earlier in the evening, we are happy to have a paraprofessional contract in front of us this evening for your consideration and approval.
Yeah, and I'll just give a real quick update, and there was some notes in the last newsletter, but we met with the paras last week, the para-union reps, and came with some adjustments to the last tentative agreement that was put out there. They made some adjustments to that, shifted some money around so it would fall into the hourly rate of pay. And the best example on that is we were going to add another paid holiday. Was it New Year's Eve day, something like that? And so making some adjustments with that paid holiday being put into the wages and paying the people when they're here working rather than a paid holiday. So some shifts like that with the last tentative agreement. When those shifts took place, there was a slight 0.3% maybe increase over the last tentative agreement, but it panned out to be very close or fairly close to the deal that we had in place last time. And so with that, I would ask that the board approves the committee's recommendation. And thank you to Lauren and Rick and Carla and Travis for your work on that committee. But ask that I would recommend approving this tentative agreement that was agreed upon with by the para union.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Schmidt, seconded by Mr. Mueller to approve the paraprofessional contract as presented. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Fiscal Compliance and Procedures Manual at NRHEG. Mr. Mayak, please.
Yeah, this is a yearly or every 3 years or every so often, this manual needs to be updated. It just lists kind of the do's and don'ts, the how we do things, the procedures, and how we are compliant on those procedures. Mainly on this update was name changes to obviously the superintendent in different areas, and mainly used in audits, federal, you said, Carla, the federal monies and whatnot, often check to make sure that we have we are compliant and we are following the procedures in place. So I would ask that you approve our fiscal compliance and procedure manual.
I make a motion to approve the fiscal compliance and procedure manual as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Rouse, seconded by Mr. Schmidt to approve the fiscal compliance and procedures manual at NRHEG as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have a mower snow removal equipment bid in front of us this evening. Mr. Mayak, please.
The Buildings and Ground Committee has made the recommendation to purchase new equipment. We're still working out some of the details as far as the purchase goes, and even possibly looking at our current, really it boils down to our current sweeper is no longer working. And so kind of the whole state bidding process, availability of the equipment, some potential fixtures on those. So we're kind of in that process of putting all those things together. But what I would ask is that you would approve the purchase when the timing is right. And sometimes the timing is kind of a big deal here again, that when our head custodian at the secondary was speaking with the different reps, a Toro rep came in and basically didn't have equipment available. One of the John Deere reps came in and did have one piece of equipment available with the accessories that we could get in the immediate future. We have to kind of act quickly on it as it could be swiped up, but it's kind of on hold with our name on it right now. So again, as we kind of fine tune this purchase, I would ask that you would approve the recommendation to make this purchase. It might not be tomorrow, it might be next week, it might be it will be once everything is finalized and set out, but rather than waiting for the next school board meeting and coming for an approval then, I'd ask for your pre-approval on making the purchase.
I'll move the purchase of more snow removal equipment.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Shanerock, seconded by Mr. Rout to approve the mowing and snow removal equipment as presented. Is there any further discussion?
I just got one quick question. Is this, I know it's a state bid, but is this coming from a local person?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kibble equipment, to be exact, is actually.
Okay.
So, I think they've done business with them quite a few times actually in the past also, so it worked out well that way.
I'm not sure how that whole state thing works.
Yeah. Carla can probably better describe it, but.
You guys covered it. I actually haven't seen the state bid paperwork. That was one of the things we're waiting on from these guys, but they do it, he has it. And yeah, like our vans, for example, we're getting those from Fergus Falls because that one particular dealership got the state bid. And I haven't ever looked at a state bid on lawnmower equipment, so we'll see what it looks like up there.
Good question though. And that is a good point too, how we try to keep our businesses local as we possibly can when we can, so that's a good point, actually. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Sorry that Terry isn't with us tonight to be thanked for her great work on this superintendent evaluation form. I know she and maybe some others joined in on that process of making that our own, but we are assured that Mr. Mayak is comfortable with that, along with hopefully the other board members had an opportunity to read through that, but they have prioritized 4 different focus areas, and that will be the tool after your approval here this evening that we will use next July, August timeframe to sit down with Mr. Mayak and go over those areas. So if anyone has anything to add about that particular form, feel free to.
I like that form better than the multi-page.
Absolutely. No, that's great work, like I said, so, yeah. If not, I would entertain a motion to approve that particular form.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right. Motion made by Mr. Mueller, seconded by Mr. Schmidt to approve the superintendent evaluation form as presented. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to the end of the meeting this evening, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Shanerock, seconded by Ms. Maloney to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Over.